So yeah, Brian, this was a direct message to me, but Brian raised a lot of good points here. For those of you who didn't watch the recent videos that Cecilia, Maggie, and I did, just about like, with the state of the world and world events, war, climate change, social inequality, things of that nature, like how are we supposed to apply these principles in good faith? And are we being selfish in how we apply them if we aren't aware and trying to do something about the state of the world, right? And so you can watch those videos and, I think, again, obviously everybody has to come to their own decisions and, have their own moral compass, I guess you would say, about how to treat world events or large scale events that we seemingly have very little control over. Although people in the manifestation community, some people would say that they do have control over them, which I completely disagree with and I think is absurd, at least most of the time. But it's, several people email me about our videos afterwards. And I really do think thinking about a lot of these concepts about, big world events, about war, for instance, about social inequality, this is a really good place to come from and to almost start our manifesting journey. Just to give you an example of stuff that we see all the time, is like there's a lot of good manifestation teachers, for instance, especially like wealth creation teachers, because there's quite a few good wealth creation teachers online today. And like, prosperity gospel teachings in general, where there's a ton of value there about creating your own wealth and how you are supply, as we often go over. But, especially these days when I see, people talking about this online, these good wealth creation coaches and teachers, it's very hard for me to look at a lot of what they're saying with like a lot, like in regards to what we just were touching upon, because it's like they're clearly just going for money and living this, you could say extravagant lifestyle without a tremendous amount of consideration of what's going on elsewhere. And that's, that's their thing, right? They're prosperity teaching coaches or what have you, but there's, I think people should find out about global events. I mentioned Noam Chomsky and manufacturing consent in my video. I think a lot of people come into manifestation from such a desperate place that they don't want to think about it in regards to what's happening globally and how humans treat each other for good and bad. Because I think most humans treat each other actually pretty well. But to turn a blind eye to war and to social inequality and to say, oh, you manifested your own reality and this is why it's like that, is really insane. And, if we do go back to the Bible, specifically the New Testament, as so many New Thought teachers like to do, and Jesus was a badass. And he was a socialist through and through. And you can argue against that, I guess, but I don't know. You don't need an incredibly symbolic, like Neville-esque interpretation of the Bible. Like you read the Bible straight up and like you read what Jesus says, or like you read like Tolstoy, like talking about Jesus. I think like the Gospel in Brief, for instance, which Tolstoy wrote about the teachings of Jesus. Think about what Jesus is saying. And then, most of these New Thought teachers are like, oh, Jesus is, the example. And then put it in context about all this, commercialization of these LOA concepts and relate it to like what Jesus is saying. And there's some discrepancies there, to say the least. So, yeah. Miriam said, on the note about moral awareness, I remember listening to Abraham Hicks say that worrying about others doesn't help them. Even Wallace says that if you want to help others, you have to succeed for yourself. It's something I have a hard time wrapping my head around too, but if it's true that we have limited control and influence. Yeah, well, I mean, let me be blunt here. I disagree with a lot of stuff that Abraham Hicks say, a lot, including that in large part. I trust my man Jesus more than that. You know, of course, Abraham Hicks probably meant it in a more nuanced way, right? Like worrying and not doing anything is not going to solve anything, right? Worrying is not going to solve anything unless there's, you know, aligned thought and action behind it to change things. But Abraham Hicks, to be blunt, I mean, yeah, I don't know. When it comes to this war stuff, and it's like, you know, Rhonda Byrne and the secret, you know, and the tsunami and all that bullshit. Spiritual bypassing, in my opinion. Wallace Wattles was a socialist. I think that's an important point. I also disagree with a ton of what Wattles says in The Science of Getting Rich. I'm much more into like Goldsmith, what Goldsmith says about supply and yeah, the nature of it and like what we can do and not do. So yeah, I mean, everyone's got to find, again, other people, Maggie, for instance, like Wattles is her favorite, you know, and that resonates with her. But yeah, I mean, it's like, it is interesting to me that people just don't look at the Bible and are like, oh yeah, look what Jesus did. And don't, you know, use him, like, why not use him as a model as opposed to something that Abraham Hicks says? I mean, whatever. I you know, like, it's not like I wasn't raised in, I was not really raised in a religious household at all. I was raised in a spiritual household, one could say, but like, so I didn't come into this stuff with any, you know, deep pre-existing beliefs about the Bible or anything like that. And that probably helped me a lot. That helps me a lot when I like look at like the New Testament or what have you, because I don't have a lot of preconceived notions about what it means. So. Miriam also said, I feel like if this was the case, then why have protests work throughout history? Exactly. Oh, those people up, they were worrying, so they can't help anybody. No, they fucking worried and then they protest. They took action. Feminists fought for women's rights because they were passionate about making changes, and same with civil rights activists. Right. But those people never worried, right? Fucking Abraham Hicks. Excuse me, but Abraham Hicks pisses me off some. I've hijacked this group session. Sorry, Cecilia. Spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing. I'm amped now. Yeah. The Gospel in Brief by Tolstoy. He just, the story of Jesus, he took out all the miracles, you know? Noam Chomsky, manufacturing consent. That's stuff to check out as opposed to most of these law of attraction teachers. That, you check that stuff out and are into LOA teachings, it gets interesting. Or we can stay high in the sky and ignore it. I don't know. Valentina says, in my opinion, it may just be a paradigm. The fact that it's worked in the past doesn't mean we still need to act from that place. I'm not sure exactly what that means in context of this, Valentina. I don't know if that's related to Brian's point or not. Brian said, thanks for struggling through that text and certain topics. Brevity isn't doable for me. Valentina says, can you act from care without dwelling on worry? Right. That's the state or the outlook, right? Most of us are going to worry some, folks, especially if you're thinking about these world events and you want to affect world events in a positive way. So the worry's there, but can you act from care and take action even with the worry being there, or the fear being there, or the stress being here? right? Because unlike a lot of these pie in the sky LOA teachings, you read successful people who make history, right? Like, you know, like the feminist movement, the civil rights movement. These people took massive action, and they worried and they struggled and there was fear, and they took action through it, and they created change through action and aligned judgment, through caring, loving,